sometimes it's just this seemingly innocuous comment in the middle of the day that makes you go, Welcome to season 4 of Self-Care-ish, a show about being selfish with care, brought to you by the Plotline Journal. I'm Megan, your host, and this season is all around the topic of healing, whether it's after a breakup or maybe it's something big that's happened to you. Either way, I'm so glad you're here. Let's get into it. All right. I am currently recording this episode overlooking the rolling hills of the lush, green Byron Bay in DeLand. There's a little frost in the air and it just feels very fucking magical. And the house I'm in is this restored barn, and there's high ceilings and there's a fireplace, and I'm literally in my own version of heaven right now. And if you go on my socials, I spam fed all of you videos from it, so I apologize for that, but it's beautiful and worth every penny. And the reason I spent all this money on this location is because today at 12 things are going to get hectic because we're finally here for the shoot for the Plotline. And if you're new here, the Plotline is kind of like the spin-off journal of Self-Care-ish. It's a journal that helps you screenwrite your day as the main character in your own life movie. Sort of like a do-it-for-the-plot sidekick, if you will. And we're setting up this house as a little haven, like an NYC writer's loft, or kind of what you and I would imagine our dream NYC writer's loft would look like. It's very aesthetic, it's very cozy, maybe slightly neurotic, but if you want to stay up to date on the Plotline, or if you'd like to pre-order, actually, by the time you listen to this, orders will be out and will be shipping normally. So if you'd like to order, I recommend doing it this month because you also get a free tote bag when you do. So just visit doitfortheplotline.com. I am so glad I got my hands on that domain, by the way. It's meant to be. Anyway, that's not the purpose of today's podcast app. Today, as you already know, we are talking about drinking, or the act of not drinking. And I'm so surprised we haven't had an episode on this yet. And the reason I'm doing so now is because I recently had someone slide into my DMs basically last week at the time of recording this. And she asked about my sobriety journey. And I was pretty open about it when I first kicked this off, and this person remembered that, and so they wanted to get my tips on it. Now, full transparency with it, while this is an episode on sobriety, I am not sober right now, but I did go on a fully sober stint around the end of my marriage, and that lasted for over a year, and we'll get into why I did that and the techniques I used, and also, the benefits of it. And in one of the earlier episodes where I share my tips for handling life when your relationship is imploding, I do say stop drinking. And it's not just like stop drinking because you have a clear mind. Stop drinking so they don't have any ammunition against you, but also so you have a clear mind, so you can take on everything and feel all the emotions, because a really bad breakup or a divorce is kind of like going to war, but you have to be very politically correct. And it's kind of like a Cold War, really. Everyone's putting on a nice face, but you're not friends. So it is very difficult. So drinking just can make things harder. But what I'll cover in this episode, like I said, is a few things. Number one, I'm going to talk about what triggered my switch into sobriety, which is its own very weird story. 2, how I handled it, and I'll share a few tips for you if you're sober curious. And 3, the impact this experience has had on my approach to drinking now, because it truly radically shifted my mindset around it. So if that is something you might find helpful, please stay tuned and we will get into it. So, sobriety. How did we get here? Or wherever I am with it right now. As a bit of backstory, my dad has been actively and openly sober and in AA for as long as I have been alive. He has literally never drunk any alcohol around me. So I wouldn't say that even though I am the child of an inverted commas alcoholic, I never experienced the alcoholism side of it. In fact, I had this really great example of sobriety in my life, and I'm not being like, oh, that's so great, I'm so awesome. It's just setting the scene for you, okay? My mother, however, she loves a cocktail hour, which is completely her right to do so. And I really understand it, because if you think about it, all of our mothers came of age in this post-feminist era when advertisers really heavily linked feminism to alcohol, especially in Australia. Now, keep in mind, in Australia, women weren't even allowed in the pubs for a drink until the 70s. So I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, but advertisers back then saw this very lucrative new market in women. And so they really pushed the whole drink up, you got to keep up with the boys, show them that you deserve to be at the bar kind of culture thing. So that's what my mom grew up with. So I guess to have some empathy for, the boomer culture, if you or I grew up with that kind of conditioning, we'd be loving a drink too. And we would probably equate it with freedom and feminism and doing you. I mean, I looked at a poster for Sex and the City 2 the other day, and it was just the girls holding up giant cocktail glasses to the skyline of New York. And I was like, wow, alcohol is front and center there. Although now we all know that a hangover is literally the last thing that we would equate to feeling free or, empowered. But I digress. I could go on for hours about this. So anyway, my mom loves a drink. My dad does not, or he can't, as he would say. But like many women, I fully subscribed to the wine mum memes, especially, when I became a parent. And my ex and I, we would always pretty much finish the day with cracking open a bottle of wine. And now I think back in hindsight, and it definitely just felt like we were probably lubricating over the squeaky parts of our relationship. But anyway, we would finish the day, and then we would usually meet other parents down at the park or at the beach, which we lived nearby, and we would just bring some beers. And this was our after work routine pretty much every day. And if you are not an Australian millennial parent, it is really hard to explain, because I think the culture around drinking has changed so dramatically over the past even 4 years. But this was the vibe for us, especially around COVID. It escalated. There was so much chatter in the media and online. There was jokes about, oh well, we stuck in home, might as well drink, lol. And so a ton of us, aka all of us, were drinking a lot in COVID. And so the day I decided to stop drinking went as thus. Again, if you're not from Australia, this story is going to sound weird, but here we go. So I met up with a bunch of other local mums in the park for a picnic while our kids were on the playground, and we were sharing wine and cheese, a very classy public drinking session, because there was cheese involved, you know what I mean? And because at the time, my ex and I were doing this week on, week off, taking turns being the main parent and handling the household labor thing. 1 week I would handle all the cooking and cleaning, and then the next week he would. So I was on my soapbox at the time saying this was incredible, this was awesome, it gave me a break from just parenting and cleaning and working all the time. I felt like I was actually getting time off. I actually have a whole episode on this, and it's called Parenting Like You're Divorced, because I love a little controversial title, but basically it's just a way of saying you need to do 50-50 housework at home. So go fish that one out if you're interested. Anyway, so we were all a little bit tipsy, and one of the mums stopped me and said, yeah, well, it just seems like you don't like being a mum. And I paused. And at the time, I remember I glossed over it, but it really, really upset me. And now I can look back and say I was really triggered, because obviously I love my son to the ends of the universe and I would take any bullet for him. But I also admit, and I think any parent listening would admit, that it is hard and it's not always fun and enjoyable, and it can be isolating and exhausting, and it can pull you far away from your center of gravity. And that's just parenting. That's parent life. But at the time, I didn't process those feelings. I was just like, well, that was mean. That chick sounds like a bitch. And I had this overwhelming feeling, or this thought that flashed in my mind, that I hated feeling like somebody had the right to say something mean like that to me. In my old age, this isn't high school. And, people can say mean things about me all the time. I mean, I live on the internet. But the element of my kid being involved anyone who has a kid knows that that just can really cut you deep. And this switch just flipped. And I thought, you know what? She would never have felt comfortable to say that to me if we weren't in a drinking scenario. And that's just how I put the scenario together. She could think what she wanted, but I didn't want to hear it. It's not my job. It's kind of like that thought process of, what you think about me is none of my business. And I didn't want her thoughts about me to be my business. And so that day, literally that day, I just stopped. I stopped drinking. So yeah, initially it came from this weird spiteful feeling of self-protection of I'm not letting anyone feel comfortable to say something to me. And it starts with avoiding situations like this. I don't know why I did that in a very Australian accent, but that is where I'm at. But I think if you ask anyone about the moment they decided to stop drinking, sometimes it's a big thing and sometimes it's just a seemingly innocuous comment in the middle of the day that makes you go, So that sets the stage for you. Here's where I get to the techniques, the good stuff, if you are wondering how to go about this in your own life. Now, the first thing I did was I got a sobriety app because I'm addicted to my phone and it just made sense to me to kind of keep track. So I used the quit drinking one. It's my favorite and I will link to it in the show notes, but I love it. Not sponsored, because it makes you put in an amount that you'd normally spend on alcohol each week, and every day that you don't drink, it adds up all the money you're saving, which is such an eye-opening thing. So get an app. I got one, changed my life. And then I got really into fancy water, which is something my dad would always do, but at that moment, I truly got it. Because you can't buy wine, so you start caring about the pH level of your water and the mineral count, and I literally became a water savant, and I could tell you which water companies are owned by Nestle, which waters are good for you, and which ones are glorified tap water. RIP San Pellegrino, I love that stuff, but apparently it's not as good for you as you think it is. Anyway, so I got really obnoxious with it, but when you are trying to reset the habit of a lifetime, and you are standing around people doing the thing you used to do basically all the time, anything you do to stay the course is your lifeline. So yeah, do it. And then I made a little deal with myself because I didn't have all the extra calories in my diet from wine and, G&Ts. I gave myself permission to just eat whatever the fuck I wanted. If I wanted ice cream, I ate it, and I ate it without guilt because even though the sugar wasn't great, I know I wasn't adding in any extra alcohol later, so I wasn't going to wake up with a hangover. All eating suddenly became almost guilt-free. And ironically, this is a really good news, even though I was eating whatever I wanted, I was still shedding weight like crazy. Like it was just falling off and my face got less puffy and I didn't feel so depressed. I mean, it was sad because things weren't great at home, but I felt strong enough to deal with it. Like I had the energy to cope with it all. Eventually the days start adding up, and it would start with a week, and then it was 2 weeks, and then every time I managed to resist alcohol at a family or friend event, I started feeling this insane sense of self-confidence. It's very hard to explain the feeling. It's like this mix of pride and self-satisfaction. And I also feel like I dodged a bullet, maybe a little bit of smugness thrown in, because even though I know I can have just one wine and be okay, it started being about the principle of the thing. So I was there, I was clear-headed, I was losing weight, I was saving money, I was enjoying food. I mean, the perks of this scenario were just amazing. Now, here's where I get to the more emotional perks, because this went on for over a year or like 15 months. And if you are listening to this and you are fully sober, I completely tip my hat to you. 15 months doesn't sound like a lot, and it is literally a drop in the ocean compared to my dad, who's been sober for over 40 years. But I got to that level. And over that 15 months, when I tell you so much happened. I separated from my husband. I moved cities. I was settling my kid into school. And before all that, just before, my brother passed away suddenly. I had to fly overseas for his funeral. It was just so much happened. And I honestly felt like I didn't want to drink, because during that time I had to operate like on a Navy SEAL level of keeping my shit together. And actually, going back to my brother, it's very interesting the feeling I had when he passed away, because social conditioning told me, well, this would probably be a really good time to drink, Megan. And I remember just instinctually going, nope, I can't drink through this. There's too much happening. It's crazy. We're flying overseas. I don't need alcohol to make this feeling crazier. So I didn't drink, and I white knuckled my way through all the feelings. I felt everything. And the result was I was okay. And actually, I think I fared better than I would have if I was dealing with a hangover on top of everything else, because my body and my mind felt strong enough to cope with it all. Now, let me just say that I don't think I am special or amazing for any of this. For many people, this seems like just good common sense. But when you're breaking the crack a bottle of wine open habit, this kind of stuff can feel very revelatory. And here's where we get to where I am now. Now, I know I'm doing a lot of me talk in this episode, but I guess it is a show called Self-Care-ish. But now we get to where I am now, and eventually, I've got to say, I got to this point where life seemed very calm. Like, things were good, my son was thriving, work was working, and my ex and I were okay, like pretty friendly. And then, only then, did I say to myself, okay, you can probably have a wine now. And so I did. And I do. And if it's Friday and I know I'm not going to be on parent duty the next day, I will have a wine, or maybe two. But honestly, that is about it. And that's the interesting part for me, because before my year of sobriety, I didn't just have one wine or two like as a treat every now and then. I was drinking casually, daily, but never what I would call an alcoholic, or what society, the image of what an alcoholic looks like. I was just, doing it socially with my ex, or in the park with other mums. And now it sounds insane when I say it like that, but it's with this hindsight that I can look back and go, wow, that was a fuck ton of alcohol. Cook a meal together, wine. Finish work, wine. Meet friends in the park, wine. Hang out with other mums, wine. Like, it's crazy when you think about it. And even now, I notice it can easily creep up. Like, if I buy a bottle of wine and I'm the only one in this house, I'll be like, well, I got to finish it, but not in the same night, obviously. But like, I'll just work my way through it during the week, even if I don't feel like a wine, because I don't want to waste the bottle. So you can see how it can creep up. But what I do now is I keep an arsenal of ginger and lemon tea on hand, or peppermint tea or green tea, just a fuck ton of fancy tea. Or I have a lot of fancy waters in my fridge, and it just makes making the choice a bit easier. And this is obvious stuff, but it's also nice to have that reminder and to know other people are doing it. Because I think one of the complex feelings when I stopped drinking was, oh, well, you're not very cool if you're not drinking. But you know what's not cool? Wasting a whole Saturday because you're hungover. Like, I'd rather get up, work on my pod, or like go listen to a podcast and get out and about and grab a coffee and feel good and motivated. Maybe that's just being middle-aged. I don't know. Probably. Even now talking to you about it, I think, oh yeah, I could probably go sober again, or I could not. But what I'm saying is my relationship with alcohol has shifted so much due to that year of sobriety that it is now not the center of a social event for me like it used to be. And I actually don't think I would have gotten to this place if I hadn't had that moment and like with that woman in the park, and really got some space between myself and my drinking. So I'm not doing this episode to be like, oh, hey, you should quit booze. Or, hey, if you've quit booze, you should drink again, just in moderation. This is not what I'm saying. These days, I'm just really passionate about doing things that serve me, and you doing things that serve you. And if it serves you to have a wine, do it mindfully, enjoy it, make it something you savor, not a routine thing. And if you're not drinking at all, I get it. And you already get it. You get it too. You don't need it. It's really unnecessary for having a great life. You don't need alcohol. So to the person who slid into my DMs and asked about it, I hope this helped. And if you have anything else you'd like to ask, you can just hit me up on Instagram at Megan_McTavish or at Self-Care-ish Podcast. And don't forget, even though I'm still here, I am working very, very hard over at the Plotline Journal at the moment. So that's why these episodes have been a little bit sporadic. And if you are a journal girl or a guy, or if you're curious about it, don't forget to head over to doitfortheplotline.com. And I'll see you next week.